ese noviazgo duró menos que un merengue a la puerta de un colegio.
Say hello, America. We are part of the new U.S.A.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
This is the Qué Pasa podcast. And today, Danny and I am Mimi, in case you haven't met me yet. Danny is my son, or I am his mother, whichever way you want to position that. And we're here to watch along with you with Qué Pasa USA. And the episode that we are going to talk about today is episode 3, and it is titled Los Novios.
Dun, 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 dun.
This is an episode that really explores, particularly in the 1970s, the double standard that existed in the Latino community, particularly the Cuban community, but all Latino communities, and I think probably still to some degree prevalent today, where the family was worried that Carmen was studying too much and not really focusing on getting a boyfriend or forging her future by looking at potential husbands down the road.
¿Cómo que if you get married, tú te vas a quedar solterona?
Whereas for Joe, it was more about play the field, be a man.
Oye, Joe, estás acabando, ¿eh?
This is an interesting episode for me because it's actually one a little bit more divorced from my lived experience. By the time I was coming up in Miami, I don't know, 20 to 30 years after this took place, it's not like all of it was different, but a fair amount of it was. So it's more interesting to me as a bit of a time capsule, like a historical relic, but some of it did persist. So, for example, when it came to that conversation between Pepe and Joe about double standards when it comes to men and women or boys and girls, right? Talking about them as teenagers and what the expectations are. The idea that Joe would play the field.
It's good for a man to play around, you know what I mean, eh?
The idea that Pepe would see in Joe a surrogate of himself and sort of inappropriately impose some of that on him.
Don't tell your mother, but when I was your age, I was a real playboy.
That sort of thing, I think, is timeless, you know, for a lot of people. But a lot of the specifics are not.
I want to get a good education. Yo quiero prepararme.
Pues prepárate. Mira, vas a esta escuela que está aquí cerca, de esa de secretariado, y coge 2 o 3 cursos de mecanografía.
The idea that Carmencita go to secretary school, right, is something that by the time the 90s and aughts rolled around was not prevalent. There was a lot of misogyny still. There's a lot of misogyny right now. But that specific expression of it was not common.
And it's funny you say that because that came from Adela, right? That came from the grandmother. And the interesting thing, the way I reacted to it, especially now, rewatching it now so many years later versus when I watched it then, was that it was actually my mother's generation. Mm-hmm. So it would have been Juana's generation, who was expected that if you were going to study anything, it would be secretary school or become a teacher, potentially maybe a nurse. And that was pretty much it. But that was much more prevalent in my mother's generation, therefore when Juana was younger, than something. It shocked me a little bit that Adela would say that to Carmen in the 70s, even though she continues to believe it, because obviously that's what she instilled in her daughter. So that was very, very real. And I guess she just carried it down through to Carmen. For me, and you know, I want to get later into like your comment about that conversation being timeless, because I think there are things that have circled back around to today's society that we saw in this episode. Yeah. Before we do that, I know you picked that moment as your takeaway. My moment in this episode was also a conversation, but between mother and daughter, and that was in Carmen's bedroom.
Mommy, didn't you ever dream of becoming something?
I think it shocked me a little bit rewatching this when Juana kept insisting there's something wrong with Carmen. She's studying too much.
Niña, deja esos libros un rato y sal a entretenerte.
Because to be perfectly honest, I never experienced that from my mother. Mm-hmm. I never experienced like you're studying too much. You know, there was still within my generation the idea that you should study or do something, but there was also at the same time an expectation in my own generation, even more than our parents, but within the people of my age, of that generation at the time Carmen was a teenager, where it was expected that you graduate high school and get married. Like so many people were doing that. And that was somehow a measure of success. But the moment between Carmen and Juana is particularly poignant to me because Juana, in the midst of trying to convince her daughter to go out there and get social and get a boyfriend and not have her nose buried in books all the time, at the same time she's saying, I wanted to be something.
La verdad es que cuando yo tenía tu edad, también pensé en ser una gran artista. Y estudié piano, y estudié canto, y estudié baile.
A pianist?
Ajá.
Really?
Ajá.
¿Y qué te pasó?
Me casé con tu papá.
And Carmen says to her, so what happened? And she said, I married your father.
Right.
And so that moment, you think, that's not the point when Juana learns. She learns later the hard way that maybe she was insisting a little too much that her daughter be focused on getting a boyfriend. But at that moment, it was kind of like, well, yeah, maybe she should have learned.
But she learns por golpe because she doesn't actually learn it. She learns it because her daughter goes off on a date with a couple of guys who look like rough to the parents, essentially, like that the parents don't approve of. And even though Adela goes as a chaperona, which was funny and also
Very
something
funny.
that I didn't experience, but I know from you was very, very common at the time that this took place, and Adela played that very, very well. It was
Beautifully,
very funny.
beautifully.
It was very, very effectively done. The funny thing is, from what you've told me about Velia was so not Adela in real life.
Right.
It was, that it makes it even funnier to watch her be Adela.
Yeah.
So convincingly, and then understanding that in reality, this is like an incredibly talented dancer who's an incredibly talented actress.
Very
who had
strong woman.
very independent life, right? Would not have listened to this kind of nonsense, right? Herself. Playing that person with so much heart. Right, with so much pathos, not looking down on the character she's playing at all.
Not at all.
A fully dignified portrayal of a complex woman.
Making her fully adorable.
Yeah, in that kind
moment.
of... And powerful still in that kind of situation. There was a funny joke with the grandparents. Still at this point in the show, the grandparents are a little bit of an afterthought. I say that with all the love in my heart for everybody involved. But they don't get as much spotlight as the two younger generations in this episode. But when they do, they really make the most of it. Not just because the actors are incredible, but because the writing really does a lot of heavy lifting there. Like the joke of Adela telling Antonio,
Ay, Antonio, qué tontas estas mujeres modernas. No gustarles que los hombres la malcríen.
these young women don't know what they're talking about, not letting their husbands spoil them. Right. Was really great because it was very knowing. It was very self-aware. The two of them were in their power in terms of embracing what their worldview was and the choices that they made in their lives, even while acknowledging that the world kept moving, right? And I would read knowing where the creators of the show were coming from, and also even just looking at the text and the portrayal on their faces, like on the face of it, right? Meaning the face of the text, the face of the portrayal. I was able to read that there is commentary in that, right? So there is the understanding of, they're gaining new things, but what are they giving up, right? And that I found to be interesting too. Ultimately, the show was made by a bunch of people who at the time absolutely would have, and did, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, identify as feminist, right? So it does come from a feminist perspective. The commentary is essentially on the side of people like Juanita shouldn't have had to give up on their dreams. People like Carmencita should be able to go study. People like Joe should not be expected to have to go, play the field if that's not what they want. The double standard doesn't play. I think one of the more underrated or possibly easier to overlook jokes of that is when there was that farcical cavalcade of potential suitors for Carmencita that came up. The one that Joe brought looked like Joe and was also much older than her.
Carmencita, mira, quiero presentarte a un compañero de trabajo.
¡Ay, en mi vida he estado tan embarazada! ¿Qué?
And I think both of those things are really telling. One in a weird, like, whatever the I guess Electra way, whatever the comparative for Oedipal, right? I think would be the Electra way.
All right, the one
kind of
that
thing.
you're talking about, the one that Pepe brought.
The one Pepe brought. The one
yeah.
is that not what I said? I said
Joe.
the one that
No.
Joe brought. I'm sorry, Pepe. The one that Pepe brought
was much older.
Was much older than the others and looked like Pepe.
Yeah,
right?
like a young Pepe.
Like a young Pepe, which obviously was the joke. But then on top of that, the fact that he was much older, and then this idea of having to get married out of college, but then also him telling, on the thing that I was spotlighting, telling Joe to play the field and make sure not to get too wrapped up, too serious, too early. Well, how do you square that circle? You square that circle by having a lot of very young women marrying older men, right? In that kind of situation. And that, I think, is what was being interrogated with that.
No, and let's talk about, now that we're on that subject, the moment that Sharon walks in the door ready for her date. And Antonio and Pepe both react in ways that they find her attractive, which by today's standard, I don't remember in this, again, with all the love and respect I have for these actors who are incredible and for the writing, in that moment in the 70s, it totally tracked.
Sharon, you look stupendous.
Really? You don't think it's too revealing?
No. ¿Qué va? Perfecto.
You know, if it's not my daughter, and I think that's the message, if it's not my daughter, it's okay to wear something a little bit more revealing and find her attractive. And I think that was the intent.
Yeah.
But in this moment, I was like, oh my God, these older men are like creeping out on me because I'm now in this day and age. It's 2026. Right? But I know that at the moment, it was kind of like, that's the message. If it's not my daughter, look sexy, look this, look that. But the second Carmen came out with a much more modest tank top, which, by the way, was absolutely what everybody wore back then, she was ordered back to her room to cover up.
Carmencita, ni pienses que vas a salir a la calle así. Ve a cambiar. Go change. You're not going out like this.
So I think that was also a double standard that was being explored, is like being very overprotective about your own daughter. And then yet, when push came to shove and the guys showed up, they were protecting both Sharon and Carmen. Because talking about zingers, Antonio's one-liner, hilarious. But it's his way of saying, you're going to go with a chaperone because you're not going to get away with what you think you're going to get away with.
Yeah, you're
right?
not going to be able to take advantage of these young girls. Because those were older guys also who they were going on that date with.
Yeah,
so that age difference was a consistent thing. I think comparably on the subplot that Joe had, where he was dating, I forget her name now, but...
Elenita.
There were some jokes in there about her, but I think the primary driving force there were the jokes about the overbearing mother who was trying to do essentially what they were trying to do with Carmencita, but made it like through a funhouse mirror, right?
Yeah.
For them to see like, oh, what you're doing is ugly, actually, right? And the way that she was fetishizing Joe to some degree, right? Which they made a joke about too.
Yeah.
I think it was Antonio also who made a joke about like,
Pero la vieja lo quiere para ella o para la niña.
that I found very compelling also, because there is a thing that happens a lot of times when older women, and I think this is a part of the same patriarchal structure, right? Where a lot of these older women will be trying to facilitate matches with their daughters or I guess younger people in their families or whatever. And there is a way in which they are projecting their own frustrated wants and needs onto those situations in ways that can be inappropriate, not just because they're overbearing, but because honestly, that's also a little creepy, right? like the stuff that the two older guys were doing, like that was also creepy. And that I think would have been commentary to some degree consciously done at the time too, in the sense that the parallel was conscious. I don't think, from what I understand, you correct me if I'm wrong because you were there, I wasn't, I don't think anybody thought any of that was as creepy as we think it is.
No, not at all. No, not at all.
But I do think that they did see the hypocrisy of it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The double standard. And that's obviously the recurring sort of theme throughout this entire episode is the constant double standard and holding women up to a certain standard, holding men up to a completely different standard, actually being more manly if you play around and hurt the same women or girls that you're flipping around and trying to protect, right? And I think the deliberate use and overuse of the word decente was very cool because, and that was a detail of the episode that I didn't remember over time and now kind of came flooding back to me because whether it was Elenita's mother or Carmen or Juana herself or Adela for that matter, they were always looking for un muchacho decente.
Violeta, tú no conoces ningún otro muchachito cubanito que sea decente, que le pueda interesar.
You know, and the idea of decency being someone that on the surface they could only see. We don't know if this kid who came with a box of chocolates with coconut in it or brought the roll of Rolaids or the box of Rolaids later. We don't know if he was really a decent person or not. It was just, he was dressed like a nerd and he went to church with his grandmother every Sunday. Okay.
Ay, es un muchacho estupendo, estudioso, obediente, va a misa todos los domingos.
Really, Juana, that young man sounds too good to be true.
Mamá, ¿tú lo conoces?
No.
So part of the commentary that I picked up on when it came to that, watching it now, tell me if this resonates with you or not, was that Adela in particular, I think the commentary, the way that Velia played it in particular, was that it didn't matter who he was.
No.
It didn't matter who he was as long as he was Cuban,
number one.
And from a decent family.
Decent Cuban family.
A decent Cuban family. And then, presentable, whatever she would consider to be presentable.
Buenos dias, Carmencita. I am very pleased to meet you. I hope you like coconut.
¡Qué fino, verdad?
He was wearing a nerdy outfit, but it was fancy. It was formal, right?
And it was
relatively
demure for a guy. I mean,
correct.
whatever the equivalent of that
and
is.
She didn't care. She didn't care if he was attractive. She didn't care if he had anything in common with Carmencita. Right.
None of those things.
Any of that. Yeah. Just Cuban and from a family that's not going to embarrass us. And
it's a plus if I happen to know his parents or his grandmother. So in Adela's case, she was friends with his grandmother. That's a huge plus, right? That was always a huge plus. Oh, it's so-and-so's son. It's so-and-so's grandson. It was always a huge plus without really even knowing who that person was. So I think that was really interesting too. This was written at the perfect time because, again, making parallels to the fact that I was the same age. I am the same age as the actress who played Carmen and just a couple years older than that character. This was a time when people like me were looking to go to college. I mean, I went to college, but my generation was looking to go to college, but still kind of stuck in that even peer pressure, not even so much parental pressure, as I mentioned before, but the peer pressure of, oh, but wait, I graduate from high school at 17 and then I get married. And I can keep working and even go to school and do all those things I want to do. But getting married right out of high school is still a big deal. And a lot of people were doing it. And honestly, I was engaged at 17. I just didn't see it through. I was smart enough not to. But very young. Like I look at people 17 now, it blows my mind.
Yeah,
that was the expectation. And that it was the expectation of your own peers.
Katy, ¿tú me quieres decir que no tienes ningún interés en tener novio? Por ahora no. Chica, pues métete a monja.
I mean, remembering what I was like at 17, and I was a relatively serious 17, 18-year-old, I guess grading on a curve. But, I still cannot imagine what my life would have been like if there was even an expectation at the time that I came up that, you have to do this now, right? I know that that's been the case throughout a lot of human history. I just think a lot of people throughout human history have been shortchanged,
Well, I mean, your generation was very, very different because the way, at least I know myself and my friends see it, is you all rightfully, I believe, in my opinion, truly prioritized your education and your careers over and above long-term committed relationships like marriage. There was always going to be time for marriage. So many of you wound up getting married in your 30s not in your 20s, right? Look, if you look at it, every single generation has had a set of expectations placed on them for which you said, well, wait a minute, it didn't quite work out the way it was supposed to, right? So I think that's the beauty, just bringing it back to the show, is the beauty of what this episode is trying to bring to light and explore and honestly directly criticize, right? The fact that there are expectations placed on women that are different than those placed on men, but honestly placed on both of them.
And
right?
also placed intergenerationally in ways that are meant to be, hey, you're going to make up for what I did, right? Yeah. I have a very young child, right, at the time of recording this. And I really do not want to step into a place where I am taking anything that I feel unfulfilled about in my life, or that I feel disappointed in that I didn't do, or that I feel like I should have done or wish I'd done or what have you. I don't want to put any of that on her, right? In any way, shape, or form. And she deserves to live in a world where she does not have unfair expectations placed on her because of her sex or gender in relation to what she can do, what she's allowed to do, what control she has over her own body. Like, that is all wrapped up, I think, in this commentary from 50 years ago in ways that were appropriate to the time, and to be very specific, allowable on television, right? Through whatever censorship channels needed to be passed in order for the script to be approved, and then the cut to be approved at various levels, at WPBT as a partner through the governmental agency that funded this, right? Like, we didn't really talk to Luis, from what I recall, in detail about this exact episode, but I would imagine similar to conversations he had with us about other episodes when we were interviewing him for the documentary about this. I'm sure there were robust conversations about what can we include and what can't we include.
Right.
I also wish that I knew, and I don't know if you know any of this, what the women in the show, particularly the older women, right? Particularly Velia, but even the actress who played Juanita, that Ana Margarita, had to say what they thought about this. The younger ones too, right? But they were in a younger place.
In younger,
right?
yeah. I mean, I can't tell you exactly what they thought at that time. I can tell you, particularly, I knew Velia very, very well, much better than Ana Margarita. But Velia, I can tell you, lived a life of a very strong, independent woman who did what she wanted when she wanted to do it, and fulfilled pretty much everything she ever wanted to go after. So I think she would definitely be on the side of Luis's criticisms of this double standard, which is here, but also having a lot of fun delivering the message. Again, we talked about how we can deliver these messages through humor, and I think this episode brings that humor through in small things that are very large. So when Adela, I'm talking about Velia, when Adelia charges into the room with her umbrella and announces she's going to chaperone this date, and then comes charging back in not long after that, because both Sharon and Carmen had to pretty much run away from these guys when they took them to the beach, and Sharon had to jump in the water to get away from them and all that stuff. Her humor is astounding. And she's charging in like she's got a sword in her hand. That umbrella is so symbolic of every chaperone that ever graced a Miami dance floor, or any dance, any school dance, any house party, because every single chaperone had an umbrella. And do you know why they had an umbrella?
To physically separate
separate people.
But the difference is,
I think the use of that stuff was really cool.
Ya estoy ready. That vieja is our chaperone.
Chaperona.
so this could have been played for laughs with the whole like leave 6 inches for Jesus or whatever, right? Of it all. Like,
except that didn't exist back then.
Sure. Well, no, but I mean, it's the same kind of idea where it's just like, dance further apart, right?
Yeah.
Don't put your bodies so close to each other. Could have been played for laughs on that, but it wasn't, because it punched up, not down. So it wasn't punching at Adela.
No,
it was
at
punching at these creepy guys.
It was her sort of.
That's what I'm saying. It was actually showing why it was reasonable in that context for her to be going as a chaperone, so that she could be there to back up her granddaughter and her granddaughter's friend when these guys tried to do something that they didn't want to do.
Right.
Right? Like, that's the reality of it. It's played for laughs. This is a comedy, and it wasn't meant to be as heavy. But the truth of the matter is, what that joke is getting at is these dudes tried to do something
inappropriate, and that was her sword. That was her weapon. And she had them, she was successful in bringing them all home, right? And bringing them home safe. But I think, too, a lot of this particular, all the episodes do, because you'll find these nuggets. But this episode does rely on a lot of iconic Cuban cultural references and iconic Miami cultural references. So when La Familia Chicle takes Joe out, right? The family that was so stuck on him and that they were talking about, which is funny in and of itself, they have a reference to, no, they're taking me to Los Violines.
¿A dónde vas?
Bueno, los padres de Lenita nos invitaron a comer a Los Violines.
Ave María.
Los Violines, anyone who's lived in Miami as long as I have, will remember that was iconic Miami. One of the few iconic Miami places, well, actually, is no longer exists, right? It's one of those the iconic places in Miami that will only live in memory, but literally everybody went there when they wanted to go somewhere fancy and impress somebody. So that reference was incredibly insightful about the culture of the city. And then things like Kikiribu Mandinga, which is so Cuban. And so, yeah, if you let him get too close, it's over for you.
I remember those famous words. Kikiribu Mandinga.
So I think sprinkling in all of those references also sort of enhanced the message, enhanced the humor, enhanced those moments that they were trying to, in every case, I think, punch up.
Yeah. The show is very good at interrogating hypocrisy in a way that is not unfriendly, which I think is an important and difficult balance to strike, because it is very easy, and we live in an irony-poisoned time, right? So it is very easy to look at stuff like that with detachment and judgment. I'm not sure how useful it is. I think looking at things like this hypocrisy with clear eyes is important. I think that not engaging in apologetics over it is important. But I do think that in order for us to figure out a better way forward, we can't just get on what essentially amounts to a puritanical high horse and look at it as though we're somehow better than this hypocrisy, because we come from it. It's
not,
a part
not
of all
just
of us.
That, it still exists. I think just as you'll see in many of the episodes, if not all of them, the themes that are being explored 50 years ago are still true today.
Yeah.
It's still there. There's still a double standard there. Yeah. That has not changed. So I think, I don't think we're looking at these. Yes, we should look at them through the lens of the time. But I think what's astounding to me is that even if you look at it through the lens of that time, it's still relevant today. Those themes are still, those conversations are still being had, or they should be. And those situations and those themes are still pertinent and relevant today. I know we want to keep this. This was 30-minute episodes. We want to keep this to 30 minutes as well. So I'm going to let you wrap it up with anything you need. I think I pretty much said everything for Los Novios that I can think of. I hope you all enjoy it. And I hope you keep listening to our podcast here.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that everybody does check this episode out. It is much more relevant again now than it was when I was the age of the people who were being depicted in the younger generation of this story. I hope that as people continue to find this show and share it with folks, hopefully for decades to come, as they have for the past 50 years, they find themselves further away from it again. And I think that an important way to do that is by watching shows like this that catalyze conversations like that. So thank you for joining ours. And
thank you.
Yeah, and we hope to see you all soon. Bye.